if you return to me. This phrase begins the 4th chapter of Jeremiah, yet it's not included in today's lectionary. Regardless, it's important to know this background, and it's important to know that this is Jeremiah's message given to him by God. If you want to come back to me, you must return to me with a full heart, not just saying the words, but living the words. However, if you do not do this, all of this I will do to you. The land will become like a desert. There will be nothing, not even the stars in the skies, nor the people. Yet even then, the earth will remain, the heaven will remain, changed, still there. Desolation, yet not a full end. Just a little bit more background. These are the last days of the southern kingdom of Judah, before the temple and Jerusalem are actually destroyed in 587 BCE. It is a time of great political turmoil and conflict. Many have abandoned the ways of God. Invasions are coming from every side. Everything is falling apart. Doom and gloom. And then there is the prophet Jeremiah, a light to the people, a messenger of both the doom and the hope. He is certain, he is passionate, and he is a truth teller. The fundamental concern in the whole book of Jeremiah is the question, will the people of God be faithful to God even in the midst of all the chaos and anxiety, when life itself is uncertain? Reading Jeremiah feels very relatable. Our own political and social system in so much disarray, schism, democracies threatened, human misuse of creation threatening our way of life, hatred blasting through any facades of political correctness, hunger, homelessness, mass murders, deadly drug addictions. It gives me cold chills just thinking about all the horror. It's too much. It's too much. Our lives are full of anxious news and moments. It feels like civilization as we know it is under attack, and it's losing. Some may wonder, where is God in all of this? And is there a God in all of this? The breakdown in civility that led to the chaos in Jeremiah's time is so familiar to our own. The world is almost unrecognizable. They, and we, are forced by circumstances to look at life in a different way. We have to look at it through the eyes of hope. Hope offers a way forward. The hope comes in the understanding that even in times like these, of such uncertainty, God is with us. Not only are we equipped to survive, look how long we have survived. With God, we thrive in new ways that we do not even yet know. From the prayer that I read, God of the dirtied hands, the wandering feet. God knows when we have doubted or wandered long before we do. God is constantly waiting on us to see, to understand, to return. Luke's gospel is all about returning to God. There are actually 3 parables in chapter 15 of Luke: the parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and the parable of the prodigal son. This lectionary, again, leaves out that third one and just goes with the first 2. So Luke sets the scene. All the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." You can almost see their snarl and their snark. Tax collectors and sinners, who are they? Tax collectors are actually Jews who work for the Romans, collecting the despised taxes and tolls from other Jews. They're seen as traitors, as social outcasts, and as a result, they're denied entrance into the temple. They're unclean. How difficult their lives must have been. Just imagine, just trying to feed their families, to do what they need to do, take care of themselves and their families. And they're cut off from community. Then there are the sinners. What is a sinner? Depends on who you ask, doesn't it? Anyone, actually, who lives a life in contradiction to God's laws, whether it be stealing, adultery, or murder, or lesser things. There's so many ways to sin, so many ways to justify our own failings. They're just little sins. So easy to point at another and declare that person's sin an immoral one. There must have been a great many people gathered around Jesus, and probably a great many more that should have been. Imagine the picture. People are coming to Jesus to be near him, to hear him. They're gathering close all around him. The Pharisees and the scribes are grumbling. They mutter and they moan. Look at him. He is welcoming them, and he is eating with them. That is disgustful. That is sinful. That is immoral. The parables are a way for Jesus to get his point across through imagery and imagination without outright confrontation or shaming. Jesus doesn't shame. His goal is to bring people into the kingdom of God. He doesn't scold about sins or bad reputations or even bad manners. It does no good to threaten devastation and destruction. God already did that. What does Jesus do? He sits with the people. He eats with the people, the tax collectors, the sinners, and the Pharisees, if they would. And he tells stories that lets them hear that they do not have to be perfect to be loved, and that indeed they are loved, even when they are lost, even when they're wrong, and even when they do not know where they are. He tells the story of the lost sheep. One of 100 is missing. It must be found. One lost, 99 basically safe. They're okay. One becomes so important. He tells the story of the one coin where the woman searches high and low until she finds it. One coin out of 10. It seems imperative that she find that missing coin. In each one, we are to know that it is God doing the searching. Each parable ends with the joyful exclamation, "Rejoice with me. Let us celebrate that one which was lost but now has been found." We all have preconceived images of God, right? Don't we? I imagine this old ancient artwork, and I see God from pictures of my youth. The three parables in chapter 15 uses metaphors for God: the sheepherder, the woman, the father. Did you know that the story of the woman looking for the lost coin is the only parable that presents a woman as a metaphor for God? That's just a little aside. But think about that woman. She has 10 coins. She discovers that one is missing. She must find it. She sweeps the floor looking for the coin. She lights all the lamps so that she can see better. Maybe she crawls on her hands and her knees on the floor, getting her hands and her knees dirty, even though she just swept. Looking in every corner, every crack, every crevice. Looking in the shadows and under the furniture. Searching everywhere. and she finds it. She runs to the door and shouts to her neighbors, "Rejoice with me, for I have found that which I thought was lost." Imagine God like that woman, searching when we are too busy, too tired, too anxious. Or maybe some days when it feels like we have crawled into a crack or a crevice because our hearts and our minds are broken and scarred by life's wounding ways. We may not even realize how far away we are from God or how near. Imagine God rejoicing as we cry out, "Oh God, hear my plea." Jesus' parables point to God rejoicing each time the one which was lost returns. Jesus knows that all those on the margins of community, whether they have wandered off, run off, crawled off, or been shoved out, every one of them is essential to what community is and what community should be. One single lost person leaves a community incomplete. It's the same idea of what hurts one of us hurts all of us. That includes every person inside of this building and out there in the neighborhood. These parables are about restoration to the fullness of the whole. And the whole is all about God. Jeremiah, Jesus in Luke. God is with us. Regardless of how we may hide ourselves away or how far we may stray, it's about returning to wholeness. God is waiting for us to be still, for us to cry out, for us to remember, for us to know. God is with us, and like that woman sweeping away the dust and the cobwebs that conceal our knowing, always waiting. And at some point, there is a glimmer, a sliver, a flutter, or a shiver, and we know, we feel the hope. And God rejoices. The pain, the sorrow, the problem may still be there, up front and center, yet we're not alone. Jeremiah wants the people to understand, just as Jesus wants those gathered and those grumbling, to know that regardless of the anguishes or the sins, there is hope in the midst of that. And that hope is life-giving. That hope tells us that love is a greater force than any evil. And what about us? What about St. Paul's? The Reverend Dr. Moss Jr. said, "Prophetic grief is more than crying and sighing and weeping and mourning. Prophetic grief is planting gardens of healing in the midst of raindrops of blood. I'm having a problem with that, sorry. I'm losing the whole emphasis here. Prophetic grief is planting gardens of healing in the midst of raindrops of blood. Prophetic grief is declaring to the world that love is stronger than hate, that God's grace is greater than our grief, and that God's power is greater than our pain. It is ours to plant gardens of healing in our neighborhood. In the midst of the raindrops of blood and addiction, it is ours to declare to the community that love is stronger than hate, that God's grace is greater than any grief or anxiety, that God's power is greater than any pain the evils of gun and drug violence might inflict. It is ours to declare that one small lost soul is too many. And it is ours to make it known that we are searching high and low and holding our arms open wide. It is ours to know that if we seek, we will find. Here we are at St. Paul's. Individually and as a parish, our lives are changing constantly. Too many of us have lost a great deal. We know grief. Yet we know God is with us always. This is our hope. And it is our good news that we must share as we venture into a deeper understanding of God's desire for us as a parish in this neighborhood. What does God want for us, from us, in this neighborhood and in this community? God's love is greater than the forces that cause chaos and anxiety. Then, with Jeremiah, and now. Do you know one of the things that makes St. Paul's so special? We share our sacred stories. We share our griefs, and we share our joys. We speak joy from a place of woundedness. There's healing in those sacred stories. It takes courage to share our vulnerabilities, because that's what woundedness is. It is a place of vulnerability. To open ourselves to that vulnerability is to expose us to a greater love. That is what people see when they visit us, our greater love, born out of our hope, born out of our knowledge that God is with us always. It is our truth to declare that God is with us always, regardless of the doom. We are certain of this. We cry out in joy, rejoice with us. We see you. You are loved. Rejoice. Amen.